This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Brandon, like kind of opened you with a lot of basketball, a lot of baseball talk. I want to talk some football with you. You got a chance to go one-on-one with the head hog in the offseason, Sam Pittman. What did you learn about this football team in your conversation with Coach Pittman?
You know, he was telling me that he's pretty happy with the roster he has and the way they've built it. He feels like they're better than they were last year. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to watch, of course, when they open the season with that. But I also took away from that conversation that, you know, this is before spring practice, but it was very clear then that Taylen Green was going to be the quarterback and he was going to be the starter. And how he tabbed Bobby Petrino as the OC. He said, hey, go find a quarterback. I don't care who. If it's someone, find someone you're comfortable with and you want. It wasn't, hey, let's have a quarterback competition. It was go find a quarterback, and that'll be our starter. I think it was very clear that after last season with Dan Enos and that failed experiment that he needed to open things back up and get that offense to be exciting again. And I think that Sam, in a lot of ways, had to reflect on things that went wrong last year and things that maybe he did wrong and things he needed to correct it or even revert to some old ways that were working previously. And, you know, he said that he went through that process and he feels that this team is stronger and he's a better coach because of it. And we'll see, you know, this upcoming fall. But Sam was very, very reflective with me. You know, you don't see that very often with head coaches at big programs.
And Brandon, I would assume you're not a fan of micromanager bosses. Like, you want flexibility at your job at 247Sports. And it sure seemed like, based on some Bobby Petrino comments in the offseason, that he had a micromanager boss in Jimbo Fischer that wouldn't let him take off the shackles or run his stuff. How different is that now in Fayetteville with the new head coach and kind of what he's trying to let Bobby Petrino do with the offense?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost like there's two head coaches in a lot of ways. You know, Petrino's kind of handling his own thing with the offense and has been given free reign of that. In fact, the day I went to visit Sam Pittman in his office, was just meeting with Bobby Petrino in his office, and he says he was picking his brain about some practice ideas, just as far as logistics and things they should be running even in the preseason. Very clear that the relationship there is, hey, Bobby, I brought you in to run this offense. That's what you're going to do. I'm not going to be trying to, you know, mix things up and overrule you a lot. Though on game days that might happen. But when it comes to preparing your offense and everything like that, he's not going to step in the way.
Talking with Brandon Marcello on the McCarty-Dana Hotline, national college football reporter at 247 Sports. Brandon, you broke the Snacks Johnson news, and I was kind of sad. I like Snacks. I mean, he had that play in the Texas A&M game. He seemed to really buy into Arkansas, and yet he's in the portal now. Did not get the start in the spring game. Deno Slaughter started over him in that nickel slot. Would you cite that as the main reason that he's maybe decided to look elsewhere?
That's my understanding, that he kind of lost that job and was in a position where entering his, you know, last year of playing college football that, you know, he wants to kind of be the guy. That wasn't necessarily going to be the case at Arkansas. I guess what, you know, my question would be is that, you know, even if you're not a starter at quarterback or somewhere in the secondary, you're going to still play quite a bit because of the rotation and everything. But, you know, learning more about him, I didn't know him very well, but as you said, he's a guy that fans really loved. And I know back in January he had said that, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I think from that standpoint, it made it a little bit surprising. But even back then, I think he probably couldn't quite predict what was going to happen over the next few months. And then bringing in Slaughter from the transfer portal himself, and then obviously losing his starting job after doing so well last season. So he's on the move. And I'll say this is happening all across college football. I'm sure you guys are seeing it. Guys entering the portal left and right that you weren't expecting, that are somewhat surprising. It's been happening every day since last Tuesday, and it'll continue to do so throughout the spring portal window. Because remember, there's still some teams out west that having concluded spring practices, and once they do here, They got another week or so to enter the portal, and there's going to be some players that enter the portal from those teams as well. That's a surprise.
Brandon, this is Clay Henry. I watched a couple of scrimmages, and I get fascinated with offensive line play. Kind of focus my attention on that, partly because, that seems to be, in the SEC, the teams that have good offensive line, their offense seem to click. Those that don't, they seem to struggle. And Arkansas was in that struggle category last year. And I watched Blackstock and Carmona, the two tackles, 54 and 55. Are these guys SEC tackles?
I'll tell you what, Petrino's very happy with that offensive line. And I know Sam Pittman, even going into spring when I was talking to him, was talking a lot about how he thought they were going to be much better up front. The only issue, though, of course, is depth. You got to have some guys to rotate in, and plus injuries are going to happen. But, man, it certainly seemed like even back then before the spring that they were happy with those guys. And then what you saw kind of when these open practices, you mentioned Clay, and then even the spring game, which I got to watch just some of on TV, that offensive line looks quite a bit different this year, obviously with the new pieces, but also just the development that they've had there. And I think with Petrino, you bring him in, and listen, he had some really good offensive lines previously in Arkansas a decade or so ago, but he also had one or two that were just about average, but he found ways to kind of get the ball out of the quarterback's hand a little bit faster, do some things to kind of cover up, quote-unquote, any weaknesses. And I think that's what Arkansas was missing quite a bit last season. With Dan Enos, it was kind of just it was what it was. Slow developing plays that weren't really conducive to a great offensive or a good offensive line looking better. I think Petrino is someone that's going to make things, those weak spots, look and cover them up a little bit. But having said that, that offensive line looks so much better this year with the pieces they brought in. And I think that's a group, Clay, that I think is going to surprise some people who are outside of Arkansas and the SEC that were accustomed to seeing what happened last year. It's going to be a much improved unit.
Yeah, someone asked me about, what's the difference between Petrino and Enos. I said, well, Petrino doesn't ever try to put a round peg into a square hole.
Yeah.
He just doesn't.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, even Pittman, I was talking to him, and he was just like, we're getting rid of this 5-step drop stuff and doing all this stuff. But he can't do that with the offensive line we had last year. And, it's kind of crazy that they weren't able to kind of tweak that throughout the season. But that's just Dan Enos' offense. Didn't really want to move away from it.
We're talking with Brandon Marcello this morning on the McCarty-Daniel Hotline, college football reporter, 247 Sports. Brandon, you mentioned transfers, and I know they, again, ratified the NCAA Council, said unlimited transfers. You're good to go. But this cycle, you can't go interconference, right? Or am I wrong on that?
In the SEC, you cannot. After February 1st, you cannot move within the SEC.
Okay. I thought that was right. How does that maybe, like for Snacks, for example, there's other guys that have transferred. How does that maybe kind of change their opinions on when they need to transfer if they're still trying to wind up in an SEC school?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. They got to figure that out right after the season. And that rule's been around a while, of course. And I think that, it makes it so much more difficult for these guys to kind of find spots elsewhere, because when we talk about, frankly, landing somewhere of equal power, of equal stature, you're pretty much just talking about the Big Ten or maybe one of the upper-tier ACC schools. And let's face it, those schools already have their starters for the most part. They're not looking for a starter, in April or May at one of their big positions. And so a lot of these guys in the SEC end up leaving, and they don't end up landing somewhere of equal value. I think that, here's the thing. The advent of the portal, say what you want about it, good or bad or whatever, but, this gives the opportunity for these players to make bad decisions and learn from them. And that's part of what going to college and growing up and everything's all about, is making good and bad decisions and learning to live with them. Some of them make good decisions, some of them make bad decisions, but they're getting real life experience in all of this, and sadly it's affecting some of the players incredibly negatively. I mean, you'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but there's so many kids that not only go to a lower level school, which some of them enter the portal knowing that and they want to go play, but a lot of these kids end up not landing anywhere. And it's incredibly sad. And I think here in the next, probably 5 to 10 years, you're going to hear a lot of stories about guys that completely fell out of football and end up hurting their career prospects and everything. And it's going to be sad things. But again, we're in the early days of this, and it's life lessons that are really being taught. And these kids need to surround themselves with good people to help them make these decisions.
All right, Brandon, we got 2 more for you, and just keep this one in the back of your mind. As of this morning, the announcement was made, Reggie Bush is getting his Heisman Trophy back, so be kind of pondering what you think about that. But on the transfer portal, 2 lightning rods, Lane Kiffin, Deion Sanders. Kiffin loaded up this offseason. I mean, Ole Miss, on paper, looks like one of the best teams in college football. We'll see how it plays out. But Deion Sanders starting to lose some guys. I think 30-plus in, 30-plus out. I know we're shifting gears to a different conference, but how do you think it's going to work out for prime time in year 2?
I think in most of those spots they have upgraded, actually. The problem is that you're bringing in so many new pieces once again that you're starting over, and you have to bring all these guys together and get them to gel and play together as a team. That's the great experiment, right, that we're trying to watch. First half of last season, it actually kind of worked despite a really terrible offensive line. I'm not just saying terrible. It was the worst offensive line in the country in the FBS. But somehow they were able to move the ball still. But they just lost Sean Lewis, their offensive coordinator. In fact, he kind of demoted him in the middle of the season when they were doing so well, and the offense slowed. And now he's the head coach of San Diego State. It's not just the transfer portal. He made a lot of changes on that staff. Some falling out there as well among some of the staff members with Deion. It's just the reason why this is so fascinating is because I don't think there's any quite a way for us to predict what's going to happen because we've never seen anything like this in college football. But I will say this: that offensive line should be better because on paper they got better offensive linemen in than the ones that came out. They've got really good running backs coming in as well. But again, it's all new, and you can get all the talent you want, but when they're in a room together for the first time in May, and it's only a few months before you start preseason camp, man, that's a lot of things that kind of get in line to get them to gel together, not only in a new system, but with new surroundings, new school, and everything. In a lot of ways, it's like trying to put a freshman team together when they all get on campus for the first time.
It's not easy. All right, last thing you just heard, and you're reacting to it real time. Reggie Bush apparently getting his Heisman Trophy back. What do you think about that, Brandon, as we let you go?
That's crazy. I actually talked to him in Las Vegas back in December about this, about his lawsuit and all that stuff. And, he's had a lot of people within the Heisman family that have really spoken out for him, both behind the scenes and publicly. And with the NCAA rules changing so much and everything that goes with that, I thought it was probably just a matter of time before he got serious consideration. But, man, for it to be happening right now at this moment, that's crazy for it to happen this quickly. Again, it's a new age. If you, quote-unquote, did something wrong in the past that's now legal in the NCAA size, apparently you can get your stuff back. But, good for him. I mean, he was, by far one of the best players I've ever seen in person. And that's amazing. I'm interested to see kind of what the reaction is among the Heisman Trust and the Heisman family.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.